Hello there, welcome to Alone with God channel. My name is Juliet and I'm on a mission to go through the Bible, hopefully all the 66 books, and I'm currently going through the book of Ezra, chapter 6, and we've been doing the book of Ezra and we're currently on chapter 6. So I'll just get right into it. No need to waste any more time. So where we left off was that in chapter 5 the prophets prophesied, the people started building, and then they got some other opposition, and then they sent a letter. The opposer sent a letter to the king, and so we are at the place where the king actually gets back to them about what he would want done. I'll start by reading Ezra chapter 6 from the English Standard Version. Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in Babylonia, in the house of the archives, where the documents were stored, and in Ecbatana, the capital that is in the province of Media, a scroll was found on which this was written, a record. In the first year of Cyrus the king issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be rebuilt, the place where sacrifices were offered, and let its foundations be retained. Its height shall be 60 cubits, and its breadth 60 cubits, with 3 layers of great stones and 1 layer of timber. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. And also let the gold and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that is in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, be restored and brought back to the temple that is in Jerusalem, each up to its place. You shall put them in the house of God. Now therefore, Tatanai, governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Boznia and your associates, their governors who are in the province beyond the river, keep away. Let the work on this house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, I make a decree regarding what you shall do for these elders of the Jews for the rebuilding of this house of God. The cost is to be paid to these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue, the tribute of the province from beyond the river, and whatever is needed, bulls, rams, or sheep for burnt offering to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, or wine, or oil, as the priests at Jerusalem require, let that be given to them day by day without fail, that they may offer pleasing sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. Also I make a decree that if anyone alters this edict, a beam shall be pulled out of his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a dunghill. May the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who shall put out a hand to alter this or to destroy this house of God that is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, make a decree, let it be done with all diligence. Then, according to the words sent by Darius the king, Tatanai, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Boznia and their associates did with all diligence what Darius the king had ordered. And the elders of the Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. They finished their building by decree of the God of Israel and by the decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the people of Israel, the priests and the Levites, the rest of the returned exiles, celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. On the 14th day of the month, the returned exiles kept the Passover. For the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together. All of them were clean, so they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, for their fellow priests and for themselves. It was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from exile, and also by everyone who had joined them and separated himself from the uncleanliness of the peoples of the land to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. And they kept the feast of the unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he aided them in the work of the house of God. Great. So we'll start off by making some observations, answering questions such as who are the characters of the text, and where is it happening, when is it happening, what are the events that are happening, and so that we can just get into the learning points of chapter 6. So if you're studying with me, you can pause the video at this point and just do that for the chapter, and then come back and see what I was able to do. Let's compare notes, and you can leave me a comment. If there's anything that you have observed that I did not, you can leave me a comment in the comment section. All right, then let's start by talking about the characters in the chapter. So of course we have Darius the king, who is the one making the decree, and we have Cyrus, who is not a character, but they're reading a decree that he wrote. And I think it was either the video before, the last video or the video before that, I was talking about how the governors, the hierarchy of the governors, it wasn't very clear, but I'm glad that by reading this chapter, I think it was one of the questions that I had in the previous, by reading this chapter I was actually able to kind of understand what happens. So we have other characters here, being Tattenai the governor. This is verse 6. Tattenai the governor of the province beyond the river. Shetha-Bosnia, your associates, the governors who are in the province beyond the river, keep away. Let the work on this house alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house. So clearly, the province beyond the river had several governors. Maybe they led tribes or nations, I guess, that Assyria had captured. I don't know. But so Tattenai had fellow associates who were also governors of certain groups of people. And so we also had our governor of the Jews, who I believe at this point was Zerubbabel or Sheshbazzar. I don't know. Zerubbabel is the one that we see in verse 4, who laid the foundation, and then Sheshbazzar comes in as well as someone who had been made governor in chapter 1. So it's either one of them or the same person. And then what happens is that after the decree is issued, after they send the letter, the Darius sends out to find if there's a decree, and it is found in Ecbatana. That's a place that has been mentioned here, and it's a capital in the province of Media. What else? Any other place? Of course, the temple, the house is being built in Jerusalem, and which is a province, it's beyond the river. Then we also see that in the end, the house is completed. And in verse 19, it says, and this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius. So there are key events that happened, and we are being given the time it happened, the date and the time it happened, and how they actually celebrated that. So I spent time breaking down that in the last part of the video. Yep. So that's the basic summary. The king issues a decree, and we are going to look at the contents of that decree, and then they finish building the house and they have celebration. I hope that clarifies that. The other thing I'm going to do is to look at any questions that are not clear in the text, and also find any character of God that comes out that I want to see and observe and think about some more. So if you're studying with me once again, maybe you want to do that, just pause the video and then look, is there anything that's not clear? You know, for example, like I said in the previous video, the issue of the governors was not clear. I didn't give an answer then, but as you can see at this point, I'm actually getting more clarity and having an answer for that. So pause the video and then do those two things, and then we will come back. Now, coming back into this, I think one of the things that I really need to do before I finish the study of Ezra and Nehemiah is to understand the reign of the kings and the timelines, and also to understand which king was ruling over the kingdom at the point at which either Ezra or Zerubbabel or Nehemiah were actually leading the rebuilding of whatever section they were rebuilding. So getting those timelines will help me to understand the story well, and that's something I haven't yet understood. It's something that I need to do even as I continue studying. So my question is, what is the exact order of the reign of the kings of Persia? Because they are all mentioned in this chapter. From verse, we see them all mentioned in verse 14. We see them all mentioned and given credit for the finishing of the house. That's something I need to get to look into some more. And in terms of the character of God, we see the faithfulness of God. We see the faithfulness of God. You know, sometimes when you're worshiping God, this is something actually that I realized. As you study the Bible, the reason why it's so important to look for God and to look for the character of God is that because it influences how you worship Him. There are some times when I'm worshiping and I'm singing songs, and all the songs that sing of the greatness and the goodness of God, all my life He has been faithful. You know, that's the song that came to mind as I read this. And when I sing such songs, and any songs that sing about the nature and the character of God, the image that comes to mind are these events that I'm studying in the Bible. And that's why it's so important to connect who God is, and even as we study, look for those characters of God. Because I sing such a song, and in my image I'm replaying how He came through for Zerubbabel, and He came through for the returnees, and He gave them such favor, such goodness, such mercy, such faithfulness, and they saw the hand of God. You see even how they finished chapter 22, giving they had made them joyful and turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he aided them in the work of the house of God of Israel. They saw the faithfulness of God. That's why it's so important to pick up a character, because it influences how you worship. Those are the images that will actually play out as you study, as you worship God, even from the study, and as you worship Him in your private session. All right, just to wind up the study of the chapter, what I did was to break down the contents of the chapter. The contents of the king's decree. So the king, after finding what Cyrus had written, he makes even an additional decree. Something that you can be interested to do is to actually do a compare and contrast. Compare and contrast the decree given by Cyrus and the decree given by Darius, and see what elements are the same, what elements are different, what is an addition. And you can use chapter 1 and part of this chapter 6 to analyze the decree by Cyrus, and also look at chapter 6 to see the decree by Darius, and then do a compare and contrast. That's actually a good way to do Bible study. It's a method that I have talked about in my online course, and I will I'll give a link to the course on the end of this video. So breaking down the contents of the decree, Darius says, let the work of this house of God alone. He tells the governors and his associates, just let them finish that work, because Cyrus said so. And then he says, pay them the cost of building this house in full. Give them whatever they need in terms of making offering to the sacrifices, whether it's bulls and rams or sheep or wheat and oil, whatever they need to offer the sacrifices, give it to them. And he says the Levites should give prayers as they offer sacrifices, to give prayers to the God of heaven on behalf of the king and his sons. Selfish, but hey. And then he says, anyone who alters the edicts to be punished, to be impaled by the beams of his house, and his house to be made into a dunghill. I didn't know what a dunghill was actually, so I had to Google and find out, so that I can actually have a mental image of what is going on here. So I highlighted a verse here that I really loved. That is verse 14. They finished their building by the decree of the God of Israel, decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. The elders of the Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah. Like they were or Ezra, as he was writing, was keen to take note of where the credit goes. And I love that even as they talk about the decree of the kings, they start by the decree of the king of the God of Israel, because if it was not for him to put that, stirring up the heart of Cyrus, none of this would have happened. So it was not only just the kings, it is our God who actually has the heart of the king in his hand, as we see in verse 22, the end verse, where he says, he turned the heart of the king of Assyria. So the king, the God of Israel, is the ultimate king. Even as Darius actually called himself the King of Kings. Was it in this or in chapter 7? I'm not sure. But at some point, someone calls himself the King of Kings. And yet the actual King of Kings is our Lord and our Savior, the God of Israel, who is also our Lord. He has the heart of the king in his hand. That's what Proverbs tells us, and he's actually able to turn it in whichever direction he pleases. And so giving credit to the ultimate king, and then the earthly kings in the geographical places, or whatever professional places or professional nations, whatever area where there's some sort of authority, it is our God who is king, who has actually their heart in his hand. And then to finally just wind up, I wrote down the main things that happened as they celebrated the finishing of the temple. For one of the things that happened is that they celebrated Passover. They kept the Passover in the month of, they finished in the month of Adar, and then they celebrated by making offerings and sacrifices. They put their priests, because this is the house of worship, right? So, and the priests and the Levites are the ones in charge of the house of worship. So they set the priests in their divisions for service. They kept the Passover. They kept the feast of unleavened bread. And everyone joined them in the celebration. Whoever had turned their heart from whatever God they were worshipping to the God of Israel joined them in celebrating, in keeping the Passover, and also in celebrating the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And I just finished by making a prayer that that I may experience this kind of favor, that I may also have the diligence it took for these returnees to actually finish the completion of the temple, and and the desire of God, and work with God to see it. It's God uses people to do what he wants, and he uses willing vessels. And if we are not willing, if Zerubbabel was not willing to come back, if Joshua and everyone who came back to do the rebuilding, if they were not willing, this would not have happened, or God would have found other people, or God would have found other people to do his will, to establish his will. So he needs people to cooperate with him to establish his will on the earth. And once you actually cooperate with the will of God, I think it goes automatically that the favor of God will come after you, because he will do whatever it takes to establish his will and his kingdom on the earth. And that's how I'm finishing chapter 6. I hope it's been helpful to you. Let me know if there are any other observations that you'd like to make on this chapter, and leave me a comment, and let's talk about it. Yeah.